Welcome, everybody, to another edition of the Inside ND Sports Podcast. I'm Tyler James, and I'm joined once again by the one and only Eric Hansen. Together, we cover Notre Dame football, recruiting, and more for InsideNDSports.com on the Rivals Network. After Notre Dame football finished the season as a national runner-up, Notre Dame's women's basketball is next in line for a chance to win a national championship. The Irish have won 18 games in a row and moved up to number one in both the AP and coaches poll this week. So what better time to reunite with Notre Dame forward Maddy Westbeld on the Inside ND Sports Podcast. Maddy is averaging 8.8 points, 3.2 rebounds, and a little more than one block per game since returning from offseason foot surgery. She's also shooting an outstanding 57.1% from the field. Maddy, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, you guys.
I just want to add one thing on the stats. The block she had the other night should count for more than one. That was awesome.
Thank you.
Maddy, how does it feel to be ranked number one in the country?
It's a blessing. I mean, it's kind of indescribable when you really think about it. But I mean, this group has worked so hard. We've been on the same page about what we want to do this season from the very beginning, right from that loss last year. So, it's such a blessing to be able to see all of that work come to fruition and, understand that the rest of the world has caught up now to the work that we've been doing.
When I asked Coach Ivey about, what the challenges might be with adding the healthy pieces back in, you and Liza coming back and so forth, she was almost aghast, like, how could there be any negative in that? And I could see her point of view, but from a player standpoint, I'm sure you have to get used to playing with everybody again and so forth. And I wondered what that process has been like for you individually.
Man, it's been a process. Absolutely. I think, there's so many ways that you could look at an injury of, having surgery, coming back from it. For me personally, I have been injured for a while. I've been injured for 2+ years now and been in a lot of pain. That kind of has just been masking it. And so to have a surgery where, you're going to be healed and you're kind of learning how to play like that again. I mean, I'm really just trying to focus on stacking great days every day. And I feel like I'm getting better every day. And, like you said, it's an adjustment. There's always an adjustment coming in, playing with new people. And thankfully, I was able to play with them over the summer. And, we built some chemistry, playing pickup and stuff. But, just jumping in, playing with this incredible team who has done so much in non-conference. I'm really trying to raise that standard for myself every single day to, not only meet this team, but also push them every day and challenge them as a leader. And so, there's a lot that goes into it, but just trying to focus on gratitude and joy every day.
Maddy, you mentioned how long you've been injured. What was the process of finally deciding to have surgery? How difficult was that decision, especially knowing that it would impact this season?
Yeah, I really didn't know what that was going to look like. I came back and I was in a lot of pain. And so I eventually had an MRI and it was worse than what I had thought. And so they went ahead and just said, this is not sustainable for your career and, the longevity and of what you want to do and the type of player that you want to be. And so, after thought, talking to my family, the people around me, lots of prayers, lots of asking God of what I should do, just came to the conclusion that this is the best thing for me. So that was the week that I came back. That was the first couple of days that I came back from the summer.
Wow. Was there a singular event that caused the injury in the first place, or was it just over time that it got?
It was something that just started hurting a little bit, and then it was just a gradual, like a nagging type of thing. And then, eventually got to the point where you got to fix it.
And then when you were out, again, you don't have a lot of practice being out. I think you had the one game where Liatu got you in the face and you had the concussion at Pittsburgh. I think that was the one game you missed your whole career. So what was mentally that like for you, and how did you try to become a better player during that time when you were coming back?
It was crazy. I really wanted to not take that for granted. I think that there were many blessings in that time, and it was a very sacred time for me to work in that space and that timing of everything, the pace of laying on a couch and not being able to do anything for 6 weeks was tough. And it's nothing that I've ever experienced before. So I really just tried to enjoy that. My life is about to ramp up rapidly. And I knew that. And so just trying to enjoy that, trying to remain present and trying to figure out what is this teaching me? What is God trying to show me throughout this process? So lots of journaling, lots of fun.
Maddy, your 3-point shooting percentage is up, I think, 10% from last year. I know we're still dealing with a little bit of a small sample size since your return, but how much of a focus was 3-point shooting since last year?
I mean, everything is a focus in the off season. So it wasn't necessarily like I was trying to focus on my 3-point shot. I would say I was more so focused on my footwork, coming off of ball screens, you see a lot of my shots come from pick and pops or, just different reads, driving kicks, stuff like that. So just making sure my feet are set, staying low. I think that's more so the biggest part that I'm really trying to be conscious of while I'm playing.
The defensive part of your game is really strong, and you guys are playing a lot of man this year. There was a lot of zone last year. I'm wondering, do you prefer playing man defense, and how maybe prouder of you guys are you, because it really showed up in the Duke game? I mean, that was kind of the driving force, don't you think?
Yeah, we take a lot of pride in our defense. I think, personally, starting out at the 5, it's very different. Having to guard their 5 players, staying in the post, staying in the middle, and especially in the zone. I think last year when we were playing a lot of zone, it was more so because we didn't have the depth to be able to pick up full court like we can this year. And it's amazing to see Cass coming in off the bench and just having such a spark that she does. To be able to pick them up full court, make them so uncomfortable, and her and Hannah work so well together when they pick up full court, and it just brings us so much energy. So I think them two definitely lead us in that realm, and then obviously Sonia's a killer on the scout whenever she's guarding their best player. So yeah, we definitely take a lot of pride in it.
Maddy, you mentioned the depth of this team. I think another difference from last year is the interior depth. When you have Liatu King, Eliza Carlin, Kate Koval, how does playing with those players help your game?
It's amazing. I mean, to be able to play with such experienced players, and I'll include Kate in that as well. She doesn't play like a freshman, and I probably won't consider her a freshman. But I think another person who is really inspiring for me also is Liatu. She came from a place where she was averaging 20 and 10, and she came in knowing what Coach Ivy wanted and expected of her and a new role, and she completely embraced it. And I don't think she gets enough credit for that, but she completely surrendered to this new role and has just incredible toughness and consistent toughness that we need. And I think that that's a big reason why we have been so consistent is the toughness that she brings from an inside perspective.
Yeah, somebody was asking me today, and it kind of goes back to Coach Lawson's comments after the game. It was really interesting to hear her talk about you guys, because when Kathryn was playing for Notre Dame, she was an analyst for ESPN and doing their games.
Yeah.
And she said, they're 6 deep. They have 6 all-conference players, and they're willing to kind of give up parts of their game and so forth. And to me, that speaks to culture. It reminds me a little bit of what Marcus Freeman talks about with football for team glory. Why does that culture exist at Notre Dame? Who drives and stirs that culture that you're all willing to sacrifice statistics to be such a good team?
It's our leadership. I mean, we have the entire coaching staff who has won a championship in some type of form, and you have a head coach who has won it at all levels, and so you know that they know what it takes, and you trust that they know what it takes, and just their unwilling. I don't know. It's just it's so inspiring to be coached by people every day because you see how committed they are and you understand that they will do everything that it takes for the team, regardless. We have ups and downs and they never waver for us. So we'll run through a brick wall for them.
Maddy, how much do you think the team has benefited from the challenging early season schedule that you guys put together and went through, even though you were sidelined? But what do you think that did for the team's confidence going into ACC play?
Yeah, it was incredible. I think every game that we played, it was so exciting, our non-conference schedule. We went out to LA. We obviously played UConn, played Texas, all of these, and they were all back-to-back. And it was just, it was incredible battle test for us. And I think going into this conference schedule, we really understood that, and we understood that, everybody on the team knows what it takes. We've been through it. We understand the adversity. We understand what it takes. So I think that's why we've seen so much success in this conference schedule.
Maddy, I don't want to jump ahead too far. You got 2 tough road games this week, but you're going to have senior day next week. So I assume the family's going to be there from Kettering. I don't know if Kathryn's going to be able to come, but I wonder if you could speak to the influence of Kathryn and your family on your career and who you are as a person.
Thank you for asking that. Yeah, Kathryn is my biggest role model. Just she's a champion in everything that she does, and to have someone to grow up and like she did everything right, and it's very rare. I don't know that I would have made all the decisions that I made if I didn't know that she had made them first, and that I knew that it was going to be okay, because she was always in my ear telling me, she was the shoulder that I needed. She was the ear, the everything. So I would not be who I am today without her. And I think it just goes to show the character that she has, and honestly, the character that this place builds as well. It also speaks to Notre Dame, the fact that, she went through here 4 years and came out a champion and has the ring to prove it. But then also in every other detail of her life, she's a champion.
Maddy, looking back on your decision to come to Notre Dame, was it as simple as you wanted to do what your sister did, or did you ever give thought of trying to do something different than what she did?
Yeah, I really wanted to do something different. I mean, I love Notre Dame, and Coach Ivy always jokes that I committed here before Kathryn did. So I've always loved Notre Dame as a kid, and I wanted Kathryn to go here. But then when it came to me trying to decide what school I wanted to, I really wanted to kind of blaze my own path. And I was a little stubborn a little bit, but I knew at the end of the day it was going to come between Notre Dame and another school. And if I knew that, then I knew it was Notre Dame. So I was really confident in the fact that I could blaze my own path here, while still recognizing and honoring the legacy that she's built.
I'll tell you what, just comparing players, I think your game's very different than Kathryn's. The person that you remind me the most of is a male player that played at Notre Dame that I covered years ago, Pat Garrity. I don't know if you've heard of Pat, but he was kind of a stretch 4, big 3-point shooter, won Big East Player of the Year back when Notre Dame was just getting into the Big East, and that was a big deal. But you remind me of him. You can Google him afterwards.
I will look around.
But my question to you is, outside of basketball, what are you involved in? Do you have some NIL cool stuff? Do you have some cool hobbies that you want to talk about? Just curious.
Well, I got my undergrad in finance, and I got a minor in poverty studies. And
Wow.
those were 2 things that I was really passionate about. And obviously a lot of people had that reaction of like, those are two very opposite sides of the spectrum. You know, you learn how to make money and then you also learn how to give it all away. So I think something with that is just trying to possibly start my own nonprofit, try to figure out, you know, I'm about to play basketball professionally and that's an incredible honor, but I also want to uplift the community while I'm in some type of new environment. So just trying to figure out what that is right now. Trying to do a lot of research and talk to my family, talk to, you know, the table of people that I trust. So trying to get that together and figure out what we can do to make an impact.
Maddy, it seems the team or the players on the team, and I would say probably the coaching staff too, have really emphasized style when it comes to arriving to the game, whether it's injured players on the bench and the coaches. Why is that important to this team? When did it become sort of a thing where maybe you're trying to outdress your teammates or have the best fit coming to a game?
I mean, Coach Ivy is always coming in hot with some new style outfit that she's rocking. So we all have it kind of instills confidence in all of us to want to try new things, step outside of our comfort zone. And she loves fashion and she loves that we want to embrace that as well. Liatu on the team is, you know, she wants to be a stylist and she's so creative and so amazing in that realm. So it's just a new hobby that I think a lot of us are really passionate about. So it's just been so much fun to be able to do that.
Maddy, next up is going to be Miami, down in Miami. And I was looking at Nat Marshall's stats and she's jacking up the threes this year. Did you know that she had that in her game? And have you guys stayed in touch and so forth?
Yeah. We definitely stay in touch. We came here together and, you know, that's my sister. We'll say that, you know, she's an only child and we always say we're sisters. And so, yeah, I mean, obviously I wish her the best. You know, not tomorrow, but you know, in any other day of the week. That's my sister and, you know, I always wish her the best.
Maddy, we get asked, Eric more than me even, but a lot about the high number of turnovers that this Notre Dame team commits, and you don't necessarily associate that with a high level of basketball. Why is that a consistent problem for this team, and what are the coaching points and things that you guys have to focus on to maybe do a better job with that?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of the maybe turnovers that we commit are very aggressive turnovers, and so I think from that perspective, you know, people are trying to push it in transition. We get stops and we're trying to just make the right play. And sometimes we don't make it. But those honestly are some of the turnovers or chances that we take that, you know, coach isn't always as mad at, especially not the live ball turnovers. So I think those are the ones that we got to start cleaning up. You know, when it's unforced, you know, you never want to turn the ball over unforced. So I think it also comes with the chemistry, and we have so much depth. So just learning that chemistry and trying to figure that out, I think will help us out a lot.
Maddy, the last one from me is about Olivia, and her 3-point shooting is just through the roof better than she ever was in her career. So I'm wondering if you could speak to that. But also she said, you know, there were a lot of things that changed for her when she was injured. I wondered if you had kind of this journey with your comeback, your injury. Did you feel like you changed in some way as a person through that experience?
Well, I mean, I do agree with you. Her 3-point percentage has gone through the roof. And I think that's something that she took personal, because a lot of people would, you know, step off of her, you know, dare her to shoot the 3 before. And so coming into this year, I mean, that's all I saw when she was coming back was just, you know, her working on her shot. And so I'm so proud of the way that she has come, and she deserves all of that. So I'm really just proud of her, and it's inspiring to see as I'm going through that and trying to, you know, have this breakthrough, coming back and So I would say for me, I've just been more of a patient person. I think this has really required patience. It's required staying within your means, staying within gratitude. And yeah, patience and gratitude are everything for me right now.
Maddy, I mentioned the team's winning streak to start the podcast. Is there any added pressure that comes to that? Obviously, at the end of the season, you have to have a winning streak to get to the goal that you want to get to. But trying to get to the end of this regular season, continuing this winning streak, do you guys feel any different from that with the winning streak? Is there anything that adds to games for you guys?
Not necessarily. I mean, every game we want our personal level to raise. I think the mission never changes, regardless of what we're ranked in the country, regardless of our winning streak. We want to keep the main thing, and we've said that since the beginning. Like I said, from our last year. So it's just keeping the main thing. We're focused on every game, and once the ball goes up, then it's game on.
Well, all right, Maddy, we really appreciate you taking time to talk to us today, and good luck the rest of the season, and happy travels getting out of the snow this week.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Before we get to our question segment, I wanted to remind you of our long-standing subscription promo for podcast listeners. We're offering a 30-day free trial to InsideNDSports.com. If you haven't tried us out yet, that will get you access to all of our premium football analysis, our recruiting coverage, and the Insider Lounge message board where you don't have to wait for the next podcast to ask us a question. You can take advantage of this offer by using promo code NDPOD. That's NDPOD. When you sign up for subscription on InsideNDSports.com, you can find a link to the deal in the podcast description or show notes. All right, now it's time for questions. You can submit questions to us on Twitter or the Insider Lounge message board before every podcast. I'm at TJamesND and Eric's at EHansenND. First one I have for us, Eric, is from Bob Oxnard on the Insider Lounge. How can the women's basketball team reduce our turnovers? Which was part of the reason I asked Maddy Westbeld that.
Yeah. Well, and when he says our turnovers, I think he means the team and not Bob's own turnovers. But look, one thing that I want to make, and I used to ask Muffet McGraw this question. So this is an age-old question with Notre Dame women's basketball. And she said turnovers are more prevalent in women's basketball. And it's just the way the games are different. And if you look at the national statistics, you see that Colorado State in women's basketball is number one at 9.2 per game. And they are the only team that is under 10.6. Florida State is second at 10.6. UConn 10.8 is third. So one team under 10.6. In men's hoops, there are 58 teams of fewer than 10.6 turnovers. Now, Notre Dame is 130th. That's out of 353. So they're in the upper half. They commit 15.4 per game. And I do think you have to look at turnover margin because I think that reflects the pace that Notre Dame likes to play. And they are +3. So they are still better. How could they reduce them? I mean, you could slow the pace, but then you probably wouldn't force as many either. As Maddy mentioned, they're aggressive with their turnovers. I think, again, the more Maddy and Liza play with the other players who have been playing all year, I think that chemistry will get better as we get into March. And just a mindfulness about it. I do think Notre Dame can get that number down to around 12 if they're mindful. But again, this is kind of what comes with playing at that pace and playing aggressively.
Yeah, sort of like what makes Notre Dame so spectacular at times can also lead to some head scratchers where you're like, oh, what are they doing? Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, they could slow the pace and play with better focus at times, but I think some of that is like a key ingredient to the success. And like Hannah Hidalgo is averaging 2.9 turnovers per game, but I think you take that because she has the ball in her hands so often, and she makes so many plays in terms of her teammates and for herself when it comes to scoring. I think the ones that are probably the most maddening, in my opinion, are like post-entry passes that are off target, just like sort of some of the lack of focus ones where it's just a pass that you're not fully catching and securing before you're trying to make your next move. I think there are some things that Notre Dame can clean up with that. But the number is probably going to still be higher than you would want it to be if you're just looking at a box score. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not a level that is Notre Dame can sort of handle and play through with the turnovers that it forces defensively. All right, next one is from NJ Khan AU on the Insider Lounge. Has the moment proven to be too big for Micah Shrewsbury? His team loves him. He has assembled good talent, and he has all the resources available to him at Notre Dame, yet he has failed to put a competitive product on the floor. Did he need a few more years of Power 4 experience before taking over a job with this level of scrutiny?
Yeah, I'm not sure that Notre Dame men's basketball is as high on the level of scrutiny as some other jobs, but I love the way that he phrased the question here. I think a couple things come to mind, and Tyler covers the men's team way more than I do, so I'm going to let him give a better answer here. I think the first year that he was here, running promos about winning the national championship were a bad idea. I think promos about the way that Notre Dame's going to play, what their style is going to be, I think that would have been set the table better for what Mike is trying to do. I mean, he's an old school coach, and I mean, he reminds me of the coaches that I used to cover when I covered basketball all the time in the Big Ten back in the 80s and early 90s. He reminds me of those guys. So I do like some of those elements. They need to finish games. I mean, they do a lot of good things. It's not like they're getting blown out from the start, but man, they cannot finish games. And that's got to be something. But I mean, Micah needs to learn from this season, but I also think I trust people like Jordan Cornette that are kind of sticking up for him, that say, hey, this is going to get turned around. These are growing pains. These aren't fatal growing pains. So that's kind of my take. How about you, Tyler?
Yeah, I think, I mean, to start, there's fair and unfair criticism for Micah Shrewsbury out there. I think he has seemingly let in more of the unfair criticism into, like Marcus Freeman talks about blocking out the noise. It doesn't seem that Micah Shrewsbury is doing a great job of blocking out the noise right now, because it seems like he feels this pressure. And like you mentioned, like, I don't think that they're like Notre Dame men's basketball has the same high level of scrutiny as probably a lot of the other teams in its own conference. Certainly not the other basketball program on on campus. And so I don't know if more years of experience of dealing with scrutiny at this level would help. I can't speak to sort of the scrutiny that he heard or felt as a coach at Penn State or as an assistant coach in his previous stops, both at the college and NBA level. I do wonder if it's more personal because his son is on the team, and I know there's been some fan frustration for how much Braden plays when he's not hitting threes. I think that sometimes is a little unfair too, because it's not like there's a loaded bench that he can just turn to a guy that can make threes at a rate where that Braden Shrewsbury can make threes, because he's the team's best 3-point shooter right now. I think there are going to be people who aren't pleased with 2 losing seasons in a row, but like I said, you got to be able to block that out. And so that was what, like, it felt that sort of all felt like it came out in his press conference on Sunday. It didn't feel like anyone in the press conference was crapping on him or crapping on the players. I think there was 5 questions asked, and there were reasonable questions about why things haven't gone Notre Dame's way, and not like personal attacks by any means. And so I don't know the benefit of the rant, especially the part about fans. I don't know I'm not sure that that's going to ever rally fans around you in the future from doing that. And so I don't know. It was interesting. I think the only thing, like, I wrote 3 takeaways from the game, and one of them was about the post game rant, and it was like, people want to see like action on the floor. They're not looking for action at our press conference, and that was what he gave us on Sunday. I I don't think Micah Shrewsbury thought it was going to be this bad, so I think that's making it worse. And I think he knows he said it. He takes the blame. Like, he's got Notre Dame, this team, into this predicament based on the players and the coaching that they are at. Like, they need to improve, and I don't know. There's a lot of answers on the bench that he's not turning to. So it felt like a little bit of a lash out, and something that I'm not sure benefits the team, but maybe somehow this motivates the team. But I don't know, like, pitting your players against the fans. I feel like there's more different ways to motivate them, and I don't even know if was his main motivation either. I can understand being frustrated with the fan support, because even when Notre Dame men's basketball is decent, I don't think that there's a very great support for that program. There's never a student section presence, seemingly, unless they're really good. And like the Louisville thing, like, there were not more Louisville fans in the arena. But I think the Louisville fan base was given more to cheer about. But I think they also sort of, they felt like more of basketball fans, if that makes sense. Like, if Louisville scored 2 baskets in a row, their fans were getting loud and like trying to get the team going. Or if maybe the team was struggling, they would still offer that support. And I don't know that I feel the same thing from the Notre Dame fan base. And I don't know if that's just a reflection of how it feels about this team and the progress that this team has made. But it does seem like even when there's more Notre Dame fans, it seems that they're just there and maybe not as like into the game as, for instance, a Louisville fan base that's very fired up this season because their team has made a significant turnaround with a new head coach.
One thing that I've observed over the years with the men's basketball team, and I haven't covered them on a game-by-game basis since the McLeod era, but one thing that women's basketball has always done besides win is I think they've marketed their team better. Mike Bray would go out to the dorms and so forth, but you didn't have a lot of meet and greets with the players. You didn't really see them three-dimensionally, personality-wise, the way you see the women's basketball players. And they're very involved in the community. And I mean, I would say every starter on the women's team is every bit as recognizable, if not more, than every men's player on their whole roster.
Yeah, I think it's tough, though, because do you want to throw more on the plate of student athletes who are struggling to have success on the field or on the court? So, like, I think the success has to be there in some way.
No, but even when they were winning, they had some good years under Mike Bray toward the end of his time there, and they've been in the NCAA tournament. I still didn't feel like they connected with the community as well as the women's team did. But that's just an observation. That's not the reason why there was a rant.
Yeah. All right. Next question is from Marie Biafore at Biafore_Marie. The men's basketball team currently seems like a mess. I know Shrewsbury has recruited a great class for next year, but with all that's going on this year, how concerned are you that the majority of the current players will go into the transfer portal?
Well, I think the fans may want to go into the transfer portal. Retention is important, but you can't worry about players going into the portal or not going into the portal. It's just where we are right now. But I think what Micah Shrewsbury, and Tyler, you're closer to the team, so you could speak to this. He needs buy-in on his methods, on what he's doing, his vision. And to me, the way that they're recruiting reflects that, because if you don't have current players buying in, you're not going to be able to get players of that caliber. But I think the buy-in into the process, that this is a necessary part of growth. I mean, if they're buying in, then I think this thing gets turned around, and maybe we start to see that toward the end of the season and then into next season. But Tyler, I'm curious what you think, since you're around them more.
Yeah, I don't get a sense that there's not a buy-in. Like, I think they're obviously in a very bad spot in terms of, like, things don't seem to be going their way, and they keep finding ways to lose. And I think that it takes a mental toll on players. Part of what Micah Shrewsbury was saying after Sunday's game was that you don't give up on these players. And I think there are some reasons where you're like, man, when this player comes in the game, I don't know what he's adding offensively. And I think Micah Shrewsbury knows those limitations, And so I think there is a talent disparity that they have to overcome. And I think he sees it as something that's going to be more gradual. It's not going to be, hey, from December to March, we're going to be so much better as a basketball team. Like, I got guys that are going to be here for 3 or 4 years. So, I mean, I don't see like an exodus coming. I mean, and like, even if there was, I think there's probably a small number of players that you would really feel bad about losing. There's a lot of players that it's like, I don't know. Like, they're going to have to continue to get better, or I'm not sure how much they're going to play the rest of their careers at Notre Dame if these freshmen who are coming in are as good as advertised. Certainly losing Marcus Burton would be a terrible thing for Notre Dame. You don't want to lose Tay Davis, Keba Jai, and the freshman class that are already on campus. But those freshmen are getting some playing time. Like, they're not playing a lot. Sir Muhammad's playing the most of the group. He's been starting. Tay Davis and Keba Jai are sort of Shrewsbury guys. Like, they came here for him. So I don't really see them like feeling they got to get out of here. Burton was a Notre Dame guy first. Like, he came to Notre Dame when Mike Bray was the head coach, or signed with Notre Dame, and decided to stick with that decision. So I don't know what he'll do moving forward, but I think the bigger concern is that Notre Dame needs to do a better job of bringing in portal players that can complement the team. I think this past offseason didn't go well in terms of portal additions. Matt Alako was the best addition they made, and he's unfortunately been hurt lately. I don't think the other guys have really moved the needle for Notre Dame, and I think they needed more guys that couldn't move the needle, and so I think that's been a problem. Maybe you can't go for as many guys this coming offseason, but I think you're going to have to bring in some more experienced players who can help the young guys along, because I don't know that the young guys are going to be able to just hop right in there and be awesome all of a sudden. All right. NWI Irish 96 on the Insider Lounge asks, probably asking for speculation unless you have new information. Do you think that for 2025, the buys will be changed to allow the top 4 teams to get them regardless of status and conference champions? And obviously this is shifting back to football.
Right. So to make changes for the 2025 college football playoff, there has to be unanimity. For the changes 2026 and beyond, not. But 2025, everybody has to agree. That means every conference has to agree, plus Notre Dame. I do not think that will happen. I don't see the Big 12, the ACC, or even the Group of 5 saying, yeah, let's give away that bye and that top 4 seeding. Even though the bye teams all lost, I think those conferences would like to keep that for one more year. So unless there's a great bargaining chip where they say, okay, if you give this up, we'll give you this in the new configuration, in the new 14-team playoff, we'll give you this concession for changing it for just this 1 year.
Right. Like, because as has been reported by Ross Dellinger of Yahoo Sports, seemingly the Big Ten and SEC have the control over what's going to happen with the playoff starting in 2026 and onward. So maybe, but I don't see why the Big Ten or SEC would feel like they would want to do this. But maybe a concession would be like, okay, we want 4 automatic qualifiers, but we'll settle for 3 this time, and just but you got to give up the buys this coming year. But I don't know why those conferences, the Big Ten and SEC, would do that for 1 year. Like, it seems like too big of a concession from my perspective if they feel like they can get the 4 automatic qualifiers. So yeah, there's just too many competing reasons for people to all have the same opinion about moving the conference champs out of the buys for the first round for 2025. So I don't see it as being realistic, but maybe there's other discussions happening behind closed doors that we're not totally tapped into. All right. At Charles W. Wolf asks, was the late emergence of Jaden Greathouse this season because of Jaden's efforts, something unlocked by wide receivers coach Mike Brown, or new strategies deployed by offensive coordinator Mike Denbrock? It was a sea change from what we had previously seen from the wide receiver core.
You know, going into the season, when people would ask us who was going to be the leading receiver, I think both of us said Jaden Greathouse. So yeah, we saw it in him. I think maybe the thing that helped Jaden the most at the end of the season was Riley Leonard's development. and the chemistry with Riley and Jaden. Keep in mind that they didn't get to work together in the spring, and we had seen Sam Hartman had great chemistry with Jaden Greathouse. Could there be other factors? I think, yeah, maybe some other things played into it, but I think, again, Riley's development as a passer, his chemistry with Jaden helped, because I think Jaden always had the talent to be the guy that he showed up as, and I think it's really kind of exciting what he might be able to do next year.
Yeah, it sort of felt like making plays leading to making more plays. Like Greathouse feels better about himself when he makes those plays. Leonard has more confidence in Greathouse to make those plays after seeing him do it, and they build more trust. I mean, some of it, when you talk about the Ohio State game, it sort of comes down to desperation. Like, hey, we got to make plays, so let's just give it a try. And so you trust him and put it up to Jaden Greathouse to go make a play. I think Mike Denbrock's play calling sort of aligned with that, as it became clear that those two had growing chemistry and could be relied upon to make plays. So I think there's a lot of things coming together at once. But I do think, like, it's not surprising to those of us who have seen Jaden Greathouse in practice be able to make those kinds of plays, because I think we've all sort of felt like that could be in it for him. I mean, just the fact alone that he was given the #1 jersey, I know that's not like the thing or anything, but I don't know that they would have given it to a guy who they felt wasn't going to have a chance to be a very good player for Notre Dame at the wide receiver position. So he lived up to it at the end of the season, and it'll be interesting to see how he can sort of carry that into the 2025 season.
And he has the perfect name for a receiver. Great is in his name, and take it to the house is in his name.
Yeah, I don't want to like belittle or like minimize what impact Mike Brown may have had on Jaden Greathouse. I'm sure there were strides made throughout the season for him, but I'm not sure that all of those, like, I don't necessarily know that some of the plays that he made weren't things that he was capable of doing 6 months earlier. It just sort of finally started to click on the field for him. All right, next one is another one from Marie Biafore. It seems like there would be a big difference between evaluating players for the NFL versus evaluating high school players for college football. As Mike Martin has most recently been in the NFL, do you think there will be an adjustment evaluating high school players? Will he be doing direct evaluations, or will he be overseeing others who will do most of the groundwork for that? Because he is from the NFL, how important do you think it is that the person they hire for the recruiting position is from the college ranks?
You know, if Marcus Freeman ever wants to have like a full self-evaluation of the department, the first phone call that should be on his speed dial is Marie Biafore. And I say that with all due respect, and not just because she bought us dinner in Atlanta. But I think the thing to keep in mind, I mentioned this on Football Never Sleeps on Tuesday night, I think these GM positions, at least in 2025, are not all-encompassing positions. And they're not really that similar to NFL GM positions from the standpoint the coach is not reporting to the GM. The coach is kind of the GM's boss in this case. And so all the hirings around the general manager, and it's not the same from program to program, all those functions are important to fill. And what Mike Martin can fill is the organizational part, knowing what a roster construction looks like, scouting, yes, of maybe different age players, but I think that's valuable for the portal. I think those kind of translate over. We've seen that with Matt Jansen. Matt Jansen does so much with the portal scouting. He's the director of scouting at Notre Dame. These two work together at one point with the Houston Texans, but he's also able to give great evaluations in terms of traits for high school players. Now, is he super involved in that? That's not his primary position, but he gives his opinion. And then there are other people that evaluate fit, and that's where the coaching staff comes in, the relationships they have with people. And so I still think his skill set is very valuable, but the skill sets of the people that are going to be surrounding Mike Martin are very valuable as well.
Yeah, I think there will be an adjustment, but I don't think it's going to be all on him to make these evaluations. So it's not going to be like a glaring adjustment or something that's obvious to anyone watching or sort of seeing what Notre Dame is doing from the outside as a recruiting staff. The recruiting staff, the coaching staff, they are a big part of the evaluation process. Someone ends up getting the final say, and I don't know exactly how or if Mike Martin will be involved in that final say. We don't. Part of this is we haven't heard Notre Dame's explanation for how this is going to work, either from Marcus Freeman or Mike Martin. So we can't tell you how everything's going to play out. We need to have them explain it to us. But there have been times, like I mentioned, like someone having the final say. There have been times since I've covered recruiting where assistant coaches have taken commitments when the recruiting staff didn't want them to. Sometimes that happens the other way around. And usually those commitments don't end up sticking because there's disagreements behind the scenes, and someone usually ends up winning out on that conversation or disagreement. So I think this all can still evolve. I think whoever Notre Dame hires for the director of player personnel needs to be more recruiting based. And that would lead to someone with college experience. I would be a bit surprised if Notre Dame brought in another NFL person for that role, or a role that is working with recruiting. Now maybe Notre Dame hires more than just one more person in terms of trying to fill out what it sees as its needs for its evaluation, its scouting staff, its recruiting staff, its in-house contract staff in some ways moving forward. So I would imagine that Mike Martin will be more of a top level evaluator than the first or second pair of eyes that looks at a recruit. The coaching staff are the guys that get to go out and see these kids in person, and then obviously when they come to campus, then everyone can get a look at them. But Caleb Davis and Carter Allman are sort of leading the recruiting efforts for now. We'll see how the next hire impacts what their roles are and what that looks like. But I think if Notre Dame goes to the NFL for another hire, I would imagine they would also need to make more corresponding recruiting related hires, because it doesn't make a lot of sense to hire from the NFL for recruiting, because there's not really recruiting in that same way. All right, next question is from David at Jody3 Moons. Way too early captain predictions. Let's say 4 captains total, 2 on each side of the ball.
I think we had this question in some other forum, and I'm going to be inconsistent probably in my answer because it's not something I've given a lot of thought to. And I think it's a good question, but what I'm looking for, like during spring practice, is what does leadership look like? And then you kind of figure out who the captains are from that. I'll give you an example that's from a different sport. When I covered the Notre Dame men's basketball team, John McLeod was the coach and kind of a mild-mannered, quiet guy. Pat Garrity and Derek Manner were the leaders on that team, and they would get in people's faces, and they would run practice. And so that's what leadership to me looked like on that particular team. But in just looking at personalities, guys that I think are respected, I would go with Drake Bowen on defense, even though he's only going to be a junior. I think his leadership showed up on the field, and I think he's also configuration-wise in the defense, kind of in the middle of the defense. You like one of your captains to be a linebacker. And I'm going to go with Jordan Botello. Maybe Adon Schuler might be in that mix too, but Jordan Botello, just from everything he's gone through and being a guy that's been so resilient and grown up so much over his time. So that's kind of my pick there. Offense, I'm going to go with Emil Wagner and Jeremiah Love.
Yeah, when you go through the roster, I think it's you see a lot more juniors than seniors that make more sense as captains. Now maybe there are some guys, but like Jordan Botello, for instance, he's gone through some moments in his career that aren't captain things like that you would expect a captain to do when it comes to penalties, or even got sent home back to Hawaii during the COVID year. Right. So has he grown beyond that?
It would have been harder if he got sent to like Alaska rather than back to Hawaii. But
so my two picks defensively would be Drake Bowen and Adon Schuler, and offensively would be Wagner and Love. Like you said, if you want to go for older guys, Botello. I wonder if Devontae Smith as a transfer would make be a candidate for a captain, but we just don't know his personality or know him well enough. Same for Malachi Fields offensively. Would he be a captain material? Other guys, like if Steve Angeli is the starting quarterback, he's an obvious captain. Eli Raridan, maybe. I don't think there's a lot of obvious options in the senior class based on production and sort of experience that you would easily point to. Next question is from @Charles W. Wolf. Also wanted to publicly praise Joe. So this is more of a statement than a question, but I thought we could respond to it. Also wanted to publicly praise Joe Rudolph. I was really worried about how this group looked preseason and what we got out of them, even after several in-season injuries. Seems fairly miraculous. From fan panic to possible 2025 team strength is an amazing job.
So here's how I'll address that. I think 2025, there'll be a much better offensive line from start to finish than they were in 2024. In 2026, if everybody stuck around, they have a chance to be like Joe Moore Award good, because they would have all those people back for like a third year of starting. That's if there's no injuries and stuff like that. But one thing that really impressed me about Joe Rudolph when I had a chance to talk to him down in Atlanta on media day before the national championship game was how he incorporates Joe Moore's principles and incorporates Harry Hiestan's teaching into what he does. And I think that's really cool. It's not just about tying it into Notre Dame's past, but their past, their tradition of great offensive lines is part of who they are. And that those principles still work with this group, and he's found a way to make that work. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I was thinking about this, and I want to get your thoughts. Could you argue that he did the best job of any assistant this past season, including Al Golden?
I'd say he would be in the conversation. I think there were a lot of great jobs. I think Mike Denbrock taking the offense from where it was to where it was at the end. Mike Mickens is amazing, especially coaching both those position groups. And
I only singled out Al Golden because he won the Broyles Award.
Yeah. But I would say in a normal year, he would be your Broyles nominee from a team.
Right.
I mean, with what he did, you can only nominate one person from your team.
Right.
But boy, this is a year you could nominate a whole bunch from Notre Dame, and they probably would have gone pretty high in the voting.
Yeah. Yeah. I really like the way that Joe Rudolph handled everything that was sort of thrown at him. Maybe he didn't make every player happy when they were benched, but it seemed like he made all the right decisions to establish a standard of play for Notre Dame this season, handled guys having to step out with injuries and having guys replace them, making sure that there was chemistry still within those units. So, yeah, I mean, I think you could make an argument. Like, I think Notre Dame's defense was outstanding this season, and that's why Al Golden won the Broyles Award. But that was also a continuation of very high-level defensive play that Notre Dame had where there was a lot to improve on the offensive line this season, and I think they did it. Now, I think there is much more room for improvement still. Like, I don't think Notre Dame's offensive line was a dominant one last season, and I think it has the potential to be a dominant one this year. And I'm looking forward to see what sort of buttons he presses, who he sees aligning where as being their best options to try to get to that higher level this coming season. All right, our last question is from Jack Quinn at JQ6008. To what extent could a potential SEC Big Ten scheduling pact jeopardize future games with USC, Michigan State, Michigan, Purdue, IU, Texas, Alabama, Florida, etc.? And could the inability to schedule top teams from those leagues force Notre Dame into one of those leagues?
You know, I think, Jack, this is a really good question to throw out there. I understand why fans are curious. I think I've gotten this question in about 18 different forms in the last 10 years on different things happening in college football that would force Notre Dame into a conference. I don't know that anybody but Pat Narduzzi wants to force and James Franklin want to force Notre Dame into a conference. I don't think it's the prevailing thing that the Big Ten and the SEC want to do this and play checkmate. And Notre Dame is such a popular team to want to schedule. I don't see that changing. I don't see the scheduling agreement changing it. So I think if there's a conference that would really like Notre Dame to be in a conference, it would be the ACC, but I don't think that's going to happen, that Notre Dame's going to end up with them. But no, I don't see that changing. We got that when the Big Ten went to 9 conference games and things of that nature. And I do think Notre Dame being an independent is good for college football. When you start comparing teams from different conferences, Notre Dame is kind of the team that can to give you some common data points between conferences because they play so many different conferences.
Yeah, I don't know that I necessarily see this as what pushes Notre Dame into a conference, but I do see it being a problem for Notre Dame's scheduling. And that has been one of my concerns in terms of, okay, if the standard is Notre Dame has to be a top 14 team, how long are they going to keep getting sort of the benefit of the doubt for beating teams if they're not playing good teams in the SEC and Big Ten on an annual basis? Will they start losing the benefit of that doubt?
But they are scheduled against those elite kind of teams into the 2030s. Now they can get out of those contracts.
Right. Yeah. We don't know if they'll stay in place. Just like, I mean, even the Miami game was moved around because of what Miami had done with its schedule.
Right. But I think that those talks about Notre Dame playing more Miami, Florida State, Clemson is also a counterbalance a little bit to this.
Yeah. And I do think Notre Dame's scheduling against Big Ten has changed, right? Like since the Big Ten has played more conference games, we don't see Big Ten teams on Notre Dame's schedule as frequently.
That was more of a product though of the ACC commitment. That's when those teams went bye-bye. They used to play Michigan State, Purdue every year, or Michigan State, Purdue, and Ohio State event, once in a while and stuff. But now USC is a Big Ten team.
Yeah, and is USC going now with this scheduling agreement that's being proposed allegedly between the SEC and Big Ten? Is USC going to lock itself into playing only one game per season that's not Big Ten, SEC, or Notre Dame? Because that's what that would look like if Notre Dame is to remain on the schedule and they have to play an SEC team every year. I guess the flip side of this is, well, if the Big Ten and SEC are going to have so much control over the playoff and have 4 automatic qualifiers, and I think have some say in who makes those spots from within their own conference, like these non-conference games don't hurt those teams anymore, right? Like losing to Notre Dame isn't necessarily going to prevent you from being the 3rd best Big Ten team, right? Or being the 4th best SEC team. So maybe they would just be more interested in making money on non-conference games by playing Notre Dame. I don't know. I think it could go the other direction, potentially, depending on how the format of the playoff ends up developing. And we're all just reporting on what's being discussed so far. Like I think I pulled from the Ross Dellinger story that under the models being discussed, each power conference would need to establish the way in which they qualify their teams for the automatic berths. The conference championships games likely become less valuable. And there was talk about maybe having play-in games for the 3rd and 4th spots within a conference and giving your top 2 teams buys and automatically getting into the playoff. So I think there's a lot of changes that are out of Notre Dame's control in terms of how those conferences are going to play. But I think it's it'll be interesting to see how it plays out in terms of those conferences' willingness to schedule Notre Dame moving forward and how much that matters in terms of being able to be considered a top 14 team in the country. All right. That is it for today's episode of the Inside ND Sports Podcast. If you don't already, you can subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and other popular podcast platforms. If you like what you hear, give us a star rating, leave a review, and share our podcast feed with someone who's locked into the rest of the Notre Dame women's basketball season. And you should be noticing, if you're watching us, that we are on YouTube with actual video this time. So this is something we're experimenting with moving forward. So if you like this, let us know. Make sure you subscribe to us over on our YouTube channel. I'm sure we'll have some kinks to work out in terms of making sure that Eric and I don't do stuff bad on camera that we would do when we're not having ourselves recorded or looking like we haven't showered or stuff like that. I'll make sure we're more presentable than our previous podcast setup. But we appreciate folks tuning in, whether it's in our podcast feed or on YouTube.
I straighten up my throw pillows.
There you go. As I mentioned earlier, we're offering a 30-day free trial of InsideNDSports.com to podcast listeners with promo code NDPod. You can find a link to the deal in the podcast description or show notes. And as always, we have plenty of written content on women's basketball, men's basketball, the football offseason and recruiting, the upcoming NFL Combine, and much more. So stick with InsideNDSports.com for all your Notre Dame coverage needs.